Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health Radio on W4HC Radio, where you can learn to accelerate your body, mind, and spirit to reclaim the true potential that exists within you through cutting-edge wellness, tools, and modalities. Here's your host, Sarah Banta.
Welcome to Accelerated Health Radio. I'm your host, Sarah Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of 3 teenagers. I believe that your body does want to and is capable of rebuilding and healing itself, regardless of what chronic disease you may have. And I'm here for you to answer your questions and bring you innovative and cutting-edge technology and health solutions to empower you and your ability to reach your optimal state of health. This is by far one of my favorite guests I could possibly ask for. Maria Emmerich joins us today, and I believe she's the first pioneer, at least in my world, in the keto field and now the carnivore. In fact, a lot of the same health issues that she overcame with keto and carnivore are the same ones I have. I was talking to my health practitioner the other day, and I told him that I was having Maria on, and he said, gosh, you guys actually remind me a lot of each other. Back in 2015, I was diving deep into keto before most people have even heard of it. And all of the so-called experts were men, except Maria. And so it was so comforting to see a woman in the space with such passion and energy. Maria is a nutritionist who specializes in the ketogenic diet and exercise physiology. She struggled with her health and weight throughout childhood, which led her to become such a passionate nutrition expert. Her expertise has sent her around the world speaking about ketogenic diets. She specializes in helping autoimmune disorders, diabetes, type 1 and 2, heart disease, cholesterol issues, alopecia, Hashimoto's, cancer, epilepsy, seizures, depression, and anxiety. She is also the international best-selling author of several cookbooks, including Quick and Easy Ketogenic Cooking, the 30-Day Ketogenic Cleanse, and she's authored, I believe, 12 books, including several cookbooks and 3 nutritional guidebooks, including the best-selling book Keto, and now the Carnivore cookbook, which I'm so excited about. Welcome, Maria. How are you this morning?
Oh, you just made my day. You are such a sweetheart. And you know what's interesting? Like, I have been, like you said, putting love out there for many, many years, putting free recipes out there for 2 decades. And, I guess maybe I'm just not loud enough, but I kind of got quieted, and all these other experts came out of the woodwork, and I don't know. I'm just so grateful for you to say that.
Well, I mean it. I mean it. I mean, honestly, back in 2015, Dr. Dom was out there, and I will never forget being on an airplane listening to his long 2.5 hour, 3 hour interview with Tim Ferriss. And I listened to it probably 7 times over and over, because that was the first of the first. And then you were, I think, the only female that was out there talking about this huge change, and people were seeing what I was eating and thinking I was crazy back then. And now it's all over the magazines, and people are wondering, is it a fad? Is it going to go away? But it's here to stay.
It is here to stay.
But I am so grateful for you, because in my space, which is essentially what you're doing as well, it's so frustrating to see men get results because they're so simple. They don't have the complicated hormonal issues that we have. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to start with your journey. And back at the age of 16, and I had a lot of the same issues you did. So it was very comforting to hear how you healed yourself. So if you could start with how you where you started, and it was so young. I couldn't believe that was the one difference between us. I didn't come to realize that I had so many issues until I was a little older. But anyways, why don't we start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's true. When I was 16, I went to our family doctor, because I just wasn't feeling well. And I left that doctor's visit with an antidepressant. I was extremely depressed. I think that's what made me really want to get help. I was depressed. I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, so I got a medication for that. I had acid reflux, so I got a medication for that. And they also told me I had PCOS. I had really weird menstrual cycles. They told me that I probably would never have my own children. And that was really eye-opening. And at the time, I worked at a coffee shop where I would make the muffins and the scones and the cinnamon rolls. I drank mochas like they were going out of style because they were free. And at the end of the day, what didn't sell would come home with me. And that was what I ate. People are like, what'd you eat then? That's what I ate. I would eat cinnamon rolls and scones and muffins. I don't know if I ever ate protein. So that was my life. But that very same week, I know it was fate. I had this beautiful golden retriever that was losing patches of her hair. And I took her to the vet. And the first question the vet asked me was, what are you feeding her? And it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, yeah, we're going to do this, Tiva. That was my dog. We went home and we changed our diet. And sure enough, her hair started growing back. And I didn't lose weight right away. I was about twice my size than I am now. But my depression lifted almost like the next day. I felt like a different person, getting rid of the sugar and the grains. And the thing is I was like, wow, food is really powerful. So I decided right then and there, that's what I was going to go to college for, was nutrition. And I was always one of the best athletes. I was just really one of the biggest athletes, literally. So I did that with exercise physiology. And what's interesting is I didn't do that right out of my, when I graduated college, I was a rock climbing guide and we were adopting children. And that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to adopt a bunch of kids, and my husband was all about it. But my job didn't have insurance, and he lost his job. And if you know anything about adoption, every dollar you put into that adoption goes away when you lose a job and insurance. Like you start over at square one. And we ended up losing our house and our cars. And I was, that depression came back, obviously. And it wasn't because of food. It was the situation. And I started writing. I went to the library to write because I had nothing. And I started writing and I wrote my recipes. And someone said, you should put your recipes into a cookbook to raise money for your adoption. And I did. And even though I was known as the crazy lady, people wanted the recipes. They were like, these are good, because I knew how to make scones and all of that, just different. I call it healthified. And people were all about it. And I'm so grateful for the struggles I've gone through because it made me into the person I am today.
Oh, well, absolutely. What would life be without the challenges? I was telling a friend the other day who's going through a tough time. I said, God or the universe, however you want to call it, has written your story at the end of the book. Your story's written, but in every book, you've got to have a challenge or a conflict to make the story. Otherwise, you don't appreciate the good times. And you live life now so joyfully and in the present that I don't, maybe you were like that back then, but I can only imagine it's at a whole nother level because of the struggles you've gone through. And we're going to have more struggles, but for me personally, with the health struggles I've gone through and other struggles, I always now know that I can get over anything. So
absolutely.
And there's going to be more in life, and they are supposed to teach me lessons, and that's the purpose of them.
Right. Life is like waves of the ocean. There's going to be high times and low times, and it's just you got to handle it with stride. You have to pick your, thoughts and emotions, just like the way you pick the clothes you put on. And I feel like I wasted so much time being depressed and afraid of my own shadow that I'm going to live life to the fullest. And it doesn't have to, like, people are like, well, sure, you can spend money on this and that. It's like most of the things that I do to make life special are free. Like I go fishing with my kids after work and, down by the river. And like, I do little things that I really enjoy, instead of, doing instead of just sitting by the TV, I guess.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I have implemented with my 3 kids. And I saw you and the joy that you were when you were cooking with your boys. And you said to them, God, you are going to be amazing husbands or fathers because you know how to cook. And that is such a gift you're giving your children. And I talk to so many parents that are afraid to have their kids cook healthy food or get them in the kitchen or even just not let them order off the adult menu and they're off of the kid mac and cheese pizza menu at the restaurants.
Oh, no, they don't you've been watching my YouTube, haven't you?
Yes.
We've been making a lot of videos on YouTube and, it's funny because my husband's like, oh man, the kitchen's going to be twice as dirty. It's going to take twice as long. But for me, it's like, hey, dude, I'm going to clean it up. It'll be okay. And it is important. They know how to make scallops and all of that. And they don't we made Big Mac casserole yesterday, Big Mac wraps. And I was like, do you guys even know what McDonald's is? And they're like, no. I was like, oh, this is so awesome. You're going to love this recipe,
It's amazing. And what you're doing is you're making it so that people aren't afraid to go in the kitchen. I think the biggest thing is people are afraid. They say, well, I don't know how to cook. I can't do keto. I can't do carnivore. I don't know how to cook. Oh. Well, you make it easy and you make it very, it's a very welcoming environment because of the way you are approaching it. I want to touch on hormones.
Yes.
And you overcame PCOS, and that is something that I've suffered from, and people don't realize that it is directly linked to insulin resistance. It is a no-brainer.
I know.
And so how quickly did you see a change? And then as women are a little more complicated with their hormones, going through the ages, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, I'm in my 40s now, how do you see that the keto carnivore diet helps with the hormones, especially for women?
Well, what's interesting is my doctor told me it was nothing I was doing. It was the cards I was dealt. It was nothing I was doing wrong, nothing I was eating. So again, I hate that person now, but looking into it, you're right. What causes these high androgens? That's what PCOS, high androgens in a female body. You want some, you just don't want too many. And what's causing it? Excess carbohydrates, sugar, and caffeine. And I was living, like I told you, off of mochas. And sure, I changed my diet right away, but it probably took me 10 years to cut caffeine out. And I would lower the caffeine, but I'll tell people you have to cut the dairy, you have to cut this and that. When I tell them to cut the coffee, man, they start crying. People really love their coffee, but it's a joke that I'm like this Energizer bunny and I don't do any caffeine. Actually, if I do, I was lucky enough to speak in Paris and we were at a cafe and my husband had a decaf Americano and I took a sip and I almost immediately got nauseous. It's just saying that, your blood sugar is going up and down. And that's when you get if you wake up so nauseous that you're so hungry that you're nauseous, that's definitely a sign of prediabetes and take it seriously. But it did, hormones don't heal overnight. It takes years to mess them up. It's going to take years to fix them. But I'm a stubborn German girl. I swear when the food pushers came out of the woodwork, it just made me stronger and really want to put my foot down and do better. And there was a lot of mistakes to be had. And I was young and there was, wine to be had. And I had to cut all of the alcohol to heal completely. But it just took time to really want it. So it probably took 10 years to totally heal everything. And when I work with someone young, when they can probably change their fate with having their own children, I tell them to take it seriously because I didn't. And I wish I would have. But, we all live and learn. And what's interesting is when we did lose our first adoption, my mom told me, baby, your babies weren't born yet. And if you see me cooking with my kids, you know that those kids were made for me. So
yes.
It was all written in the stars. Like you said, my story was already told.
Right.
I just had to wait for it. And it's, still going. But I don't regret anything. But I do tell women, like, if you want to have your own children, let's take this seriously and let's cut the caffeine. You have to be serious about it. And you cut the carbohydrates and the sugar. And that's why carnivore is so great. If you are a real carnivore, coffee is a bean. Nobody's drinking coffee if you're a true carnivore, right? But
right.
I would say most people still do the coffee.
Yeah, I would say that people do the carnivore with coffee. I have touched on carnivore. I'm definitely keto, but I like the taste of vegetables. That's my issue, but I use them as more of a side dish, and my main dish is all the meat and the fish. And
there's no judging in my world. If someone would have told me when I was 16, in order to, be really healthy, you're going to eat nothing but meat, I wouldn't even have tried.
Right.
I wouldn't even have tried. So absolutely. Like I try to stick to like low oxalate vegetables, or, staying away from the spinach and things like that. But I see it, like you said, see vegetables as flavor and texture and color. Don't see that as the nutrients, because the meat is where the nutrients are at. There's no judging in my world whatsoever.
Well, let's talk about that. Some of the quote unquote health foods like flax and some of the vegetables with. Can you go through some of the vegetables and what are the downsides to them, lectins and that sort of thing that people aren't realizing that aren't good for them?
Well, let's talk about like flax, soy, chia. Those all have phytoestrogens, and we have 3 different types of estrogens in our body as a female. And the estrogen that we don't want is coming from, flax, chia, soy, alcohol, environmental toxins. You can really, especially when you're so sensitive to hormones, you got to get rid of all of that type of stuff. And that's why I had to, get the alcohol out, because it increases that bad estrogen by 300% after only 2 glasses of wine. That's huge, Wow.
Yeah.
So that type of stuff, when I see a recipe with that, I'm like, oh man, like why do we even have to use it? It's not good. It doesn't taste good. It doesn't taste like a good old steak. Why would we even want to make a flax bread? But, what was like the vegetables?
And the anti-nutrients.
Yeah, there's something called, there's a couple different types of anti-nutrients, but one that really concerns me are oxalates. And oxalates are like little crystals that are in high amounts. They're in things like spinach. And what ends up happening, like if you're doing these green juices and things like that, or a lot of spinach, there's something called like oxalate dumping, where you have so many oxalates going on. Most of the time when you stop eating those, you're getting rid of them. You want to get rid of them. And that's what's usually causing kidney stones, because oxalates bind to calcium and they get built up in things like the kidneys, and then you get kidney stones. And then what happens is, so you start carnivore and you get kidney stones, and you blame carnivore on kidney stones, when in reality it was just all the vegetables you ate before that, and it's your body's just getting rid of them. Some people will get a sty in their eye, or sometimes you can even see crystals coming out of the skin.
Oh, interesting. So it's actually the dumping after you stop eating it.
It's usually when you start getting rid of them, that's when your body's like, oh, good, there's no more coming in. Let's get them out. But it can happen when you're still eating them, obviously, when people have kidney stones. But it's just frustrating because they blame things that they shouldn't blame for the kidney stones.
Well, that leads me to, what do I do about fiber? I need fiber for constipation issues and IBS. So let's talk about that. And is that an issue when you're on carnivore or keto?
Oh, I always start with saying, are you a mother? Did you ever have a newborn baby? They go poo all the time and they don't get any fiber. And that's how we start out. We don't need fiber, but we start adding it in, and fiber becomes a menace and actually an irritant to the gut, to the point where people with Crohn's, colitis, diverticulitis, what does the doctor tell them? oh, don't eat any fiber, eat all the white stuff. Well, why do we not just cut the fiber out anyway? Like, why do you need it? And we don't do any fiber here, and we're all having healthy bowel movements. What you really need for a healthy colon is salt. And that's when, if people get constipated on a keto or a carnivore type diet, they're usually not getting enough salt. And if you think about it, when you are eating pasta and rice and bread, there's a lot of sodium in that stuff. And when you start cooking at home, we've been told to have such a light hand on the salt because it's not good for you. You might not be getting nearly enough salt that you need for the day for energy, for moods, for number two. If you add in enough water and salt, you'll have really good, healthy bowel movements. But you usually need to add a little bit because if you're just putting salt on some eggs and some meat and some vegetables, it's usually not nearly like the 2.5 teaspoons you want to get in a day. And what's interesting is I tell people, do you know that a McDonald's milkshake has more sodium in it than their French fry does?
Oh my gosh.
It's hidden in a lot of desserts. So getting away from that standard American diet, you're cutting that sodium down a lot.
And as you're cutting out the carbs, your kidneys let go of water and it loses the sodium and your other minerals. So you need to make sure you add it in.
Yes.
I loved hearing the fact that you actually are a salt snob like I am, and you take your own salts to restaurants. I carry mine everywhere, and my husband is so embarrassed. But so when I told him that you do the same, I told him, I said, I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy. Yeah. But
you're not. It tastes bad. It tastes like chemicals.
Well, it is chemicals. It's full of plastics, and it's not even salt anymore. Well, one thing I want to talk about is the oxidative priority and what our body does with what calories come in and what it will burn first. Because people ask me all the time, well, if I do the keto diet, does that mean I can't have a glass of wine, or does that mean I can't have this or that? And I say, look, I'm not judging, but this is what your body does when you do have that alcohol or when you do have a little bit of carbs. So let's go through the oxidative priority.
Yeah, in my book, Keto, The Complete Guide to Success, I go through oxidative priority. And this is what I do, a lot of times I have presentations on, because people are so confused about the fact that your body prioritizes certain things. If you have alcohol, that is priority number one. Guess why? Because it's completely toxic, right? There's no storage site for it. What happens, I talked about the whole estrogen bond, but your body has to burn alcohol first. And what happens when you drink alcohol? You're usually eating a bunch of chips with salsa and dip or whatever, so you're getting a lot of carbohydrates, fat, and protein in too. And while it's burning alcohol, what's interesting is alcoholics usually have a very low A1C. And that's because it's oxidizing alcohol instead of the carbohydrates, which is just like totally crazy to me. But it burns alcohol first. The next thing it's going to burn is exogenous ketones. So if you're someone who thinks that, I'm going to take these fake ketones to get into ketosis, and then I can kind of eat whatever I want, it's going to be burning the exogenous ketones instead of your body fat, because that's the last thing it's going to burn. So we go to alcohol, we go to exogenous ketones, and then it's going to burn carbohydrates. And so it's burning the carbohydrates, and then it's going to burn protein, and then it's going to burn fat, and then body fat. So you have to go through all 5 of those. But you know what? You want to burn body fat? Cut out the alcohol, because we know that it's not needed. It turns to sugar. Most alcoholics I work with, when they cut out alcohol, guess what? They crave sugar, because alcohol was turning into sugar in their body, and they were trying to give their body that craving they were asking for. So cut out the alcohol, you don't need it. Cut out the exogenous ketones, they're expensive, they're unneeded. Lower those carbohydrates or eliminate them, and then focus on getting enough protein in so you build muscle, or you at least maintain your muscle. Especially as we age, we need more muscle or protein. Don't fear the protein, it doesn't turn into sugar. It's a demand-driven process. And then fat is a lever. If you're in keto for weight loss, turn that lever down a little bit so you can actually burn body fat. Not everybody's doing keto for weight loss. That's great. If you're doing it for maybe anxiety, or if you're doing it for epilepsy, turn that fat dial up. You don't want to burn body fat. You don't need to. Turn the fat dial up. Turn the protein up a little bit too.
So we have a ton of questions that are coming in, and one that is a very common question I get all the time. Missy's asking, my doctor said no salt for me due to kidney disease. Since I can't do that, what should I do? Well,
I have hundreds of testimonies on clients that had kidney disease up to stage 4 kidney disease and reversed it completely, eliminating carbohydrates. Salt is not the devil when you get rid of the carbohydrates. You're retaining all of this water with carbohydrates. When you get rid of the carbohydrates, along goes that water loss. And then you need some sort of water retaining, thing, because otherwise you would have headaches and really low energy. Salt is not the devil. And when you get rid of things like bread and pasta and all of the packaged foods and the packaged desserts, you need to add good quality salt into your food. That salt is not causing kidney disease. It is carbohydrates and sugar.
Right. And same with heart disease. People always talk about their heart disease. I can't have salt because of my cholesterol or my heart disease. And let's talk about cholesterol. If someone has high, quote unquote, high cholesterol, and they say, well, I can't go on a ketogenic diet, there's too much fat, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say, first of all, a ketogenic diet, you don't have to add in more fat. Most standard American diets are getting plenty of fat. You're just taking away the carbohydrates. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So let's get that straight. But second of all, cholesterol is not the devil. The cholesterol is actually your firefighter, kind of like trying to get rid of the inflammation. Don't kill the messenger. Don't kill the firefighters. Kill the inflammation. And what causes inflammation? Sugar and carbohydrates. And high cholesterol, what is high? My cholesterol is 300, but guess what? I have a calcium score of 0. That means that the plaque in my arteries is 0. There's nothing. You want to focus on a calcium score. Cholesterol, let's talk about cholesterol makes healthy hormones. So if you have any low hormones, like if you do have issues with PCOS, if you have low progesterone, what's interesting is when women go through the change, their progesterone and estrogen levels, their ovaries are no longer putting that out, okay? And what happens is their cholesterol levels go up to try to make their ovaries spit out estrogen and progesterone. But guess what? Their ovaries are no longer going to do that. Sometimes on a ketogenic diet, it'll come back for a little bit. And that's a good thing. That's keeping us youthful and young. But cholesterol, if you have adrenal issues, if you have low thyroid, cholesterol will be elevated. It's not the bad thing. It's trying to help make your hormones. But sadly, a doctor often puts them on a statin drug, which has been proven to never help a female. And it lowers their cholesterol. Guess what? They have more hot flashes. They have more hormonal issues. Their thyroid doesn't get better. This is not a good thing.
No.
You want to focus on the correct numbers. Look at your A1C. Look at your calcium score. Those are important.
That's exactly what I told both of my parents about a month ago, because they're worried about their cholesterol still because they're so old school that they can't let go of that number. Well, let's just say my dad is a lot more stubborn than my mom when it comes to this. But I said, get your calcium score done. That is the key. And your A1C, it's these other tests.
Yes. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I had a woman client, and her husband was a heart surgeon. And he always teased her that her cholesterol was really high and his was very, very low. And I said, why don't you get a calcium score? Let's prove him wrong. So she went and got a calcium score, and it was 0. And he's like, well, maybe I should get one done too. And his was in the 500s. He was a minute away from a stroke. Wow. And he still thanks us because it gave him a lot of information to give to his patients.
Right. It's what they were telling us to do so that they could sell the pharmaceuticals. So that's the unfortunate truth, but we don't need to get into that. I want to make sure we are talking, because Cassie was asking same thing about the kidney disease and don't eat anything out of a box or a can, which we would both agree with. But what she's asking what to eat. So why don't we go through what you would recommend, especially, I know you are strictly carnivore, but how would you transition someone that is a typical standard American diet eater to a ketogenic diet? And I'm assuming that you're not saying just go eat 2 ribeyes every single day starting tomorrow.
No, I don't do that myself. And I wouldn't say that I'm a strict carnivore. My husband has Lyme disease, and carnivore has helped him immensely. I'm not afraid of having some of my gummy bears or some onion and garlic when I'm cooking. I just, it's just, yeah. So I just want to make that clear. I don't judge anybody or anything like that. But oh my gosh, there's so many recipes. I have thousands of free recipes on my website at mariamindbodyhealth.com. But I would say get rid of the cereals, get rid of the milk. But what can you have? You can have eggs. And if you get really bored of eggs, you could make my amazing hard-boiled egg pudding. It is so weird. I kept that recipe a secret from my family for years. And I did a YouTube video on it. I put it on my website. People are commenting left and right. I didn't think I would like this. I tried it. It is amazing. It's like chocolate pudding, but it's made with hard-boiled eggs and a few other ingredients. And so, just don't, in life, we were talking a little bit earlier about waves of the ocean, you and I before this. And you have to start thinking differently in all aspects of life if you want to have like positivity. You just have to stop thinking negative. But I can't have any bread anymore. I can't have any rice anymore. Be like, man, I get to have a filet mignon for lunch. I get to have this and that. I get to have, be positive. Think about all of the things you once thought were bad. They're good. I get to have eggs, like think positive. And I think that's why you and I are so successful, because instead of thinking and dwelling on the negative, we focused and changed on the positive. If you miss lasagna, I have a great protein noodle lasagna that is so amazing. People go gangbusters over that. I just made a pizza crust that you could make. So everything that you can list the food, Hostess Ding Dong cupcakes. I have a recipe for that too. So whatever people really crave and miss in their life, I try to make a recipe for them so they can slowly transition and make the change. I have some great bread recipes out there that you can try. You have to make it yourself. And it takes a little bit of time and effort. But you know what? Going back to like the whole idea of like depression, a lot of hospitals are reaching out to me because they're going to put kitchens in some of the hospitals that can afford it, because getting their patients into the kitchen and making something that they can give to others helps people's mood so much. Like creating things, like get in the kitchen. And then, oh man, I made this lasagna, my protein noodle lasagna. And my little boy said, oh, mommy, this is the best recipe ever. And that was years ago. I still remember where we were sitting, and it just like made my heart boost with joy.
It's truly amazing. And I also wanted to go back to the alcohol thing real quick, because as I was addicted to sugar, I was starting to need that drink every day. And I have alcoholism in my family. So it was something in the back of my mind where I said, you know what, Sarah, you can't let this go in any further with this. But as I went to the ketogenic diet, my cravings for alcohol went away because it was the sugar that I was craving. And now I haven't had a drink in probably a couple of years. And it wasn't that I was actually trying to stop drinking. It was that the cravings went away. You give me a vodka soda and a prime rib or a ribeye steak, I'm going to choose the ribeye steak any day. And I crave that. And as we were talking about vegetables being a garnish or so, when I sit down for my meal, I will eat my protein or the fish or the steak first, because that's what I'm craving first. And then if I'm still hungry, I'll have a couple bites of whatever the vegetable is on the plate. But there's no need for alcohol. I don't crave it. And during quarantine, you'd think that I know alcohol sales are up for sure. I know depression and anxiety are up, and people are at home bored or out of sorts a little bit, and there's food in the fridge. It's right there. They're not going to the office. They're not going to school. So things are a little out of whack. But why not take this time and say, okay, you know what? We have a little extra time. Let's pull out a cookbook and get the kids involved, because the other thing that is really important is to teach the kids that connection with and the value of food. They will never throw away their lunch if they cook it or if they make it.
We have a really big epidemic on our hands with the rise in obesity in children. And if we want to change our future, we need to teach the kids. And it's good food.
Yes. I want to dive into, because a lot of questions are, well, how much fat versus protein, if I'm an athlete, if I'm a woman or a man.
This is good. I have a free calculator. You want to get your macros. It's totally free. It's at mariamindbodyhealth.com. And then in the upper right corner where there's a search, you type in calculator. And maybe we can give you the link. I don't know how that works.
Yes,
please. It's actually going to be updated today or tomorrow, but you can pick. What's your goal? Are you extremely athletic? Are you trying to lose weight, build muscle? Your macros are going to change. So don't compare your macros to mine, to your friends. They're all different. And you want to focus on macros instead of percentages. Percentages will just set you up for failure. But it's about 0.8 times your lean mass and protein. But if you don't want to do the math, I do it all for free for you. But the protein is a goal. You always want to hit your protein goal. Otherwise, you're going to lose lean mass. And what that means is, you know what? It's really easy to lose that muscle tissue, and it shows really quickly on the scale. So don't focus just on the number on the scale going down, because you only want the fat to go down in your diet. Some people will do these fat fasts, and they're like, oh, I lost so much weight. It's like, yeah, you just lost a whole bunch of muscle, you know? That's not a good thing. You want to stay strong. So protein is a goal. Fat is a lever. So fat is the maximum I'll give you on the calculator, depending on if you're an athlete or what. I mean, when I'm running marathons, I turn the fat up because I need more of that fat energy. So that'll change depending on your goals and your athleticism. But then carbs are a maximum. Don't go over that.
Got it.
If you go under, that's all good.
And that's the way I eat. I said, like, I will focus on my protein, and I'll use the fat as kind of the filler to see how. Well, now,
but I
what
want
is
to make this clear too? Like, when we talk about fat to protein ratio, all of the studies, like Volek and Finney studies, those are the pioneers doing all of these studies way decades ago. They did a 1-to-1 ratio, protein to fat. And what does that look like? It looks like the fat that's in the protein already. You don't need to add a stick of butter to your steak. You know, if you want to be lean and yet still strong, eat the protein. There's enough fat in the protein. Like an egg is a perfect 1-to-1 ratio. You don't need to add a bunch of butter to the eggs cooking to make it a ketogenic meal. Don't get caught up on the ketone numbers. Higher ketones do not mean better fat burning. It does not mean that. It just means that you have more fuel in your body, you know?
Right. That's something that I learned off in the very beginning when I was doing keto. I was taking exogenous ketones, and I was also, one of my clients was a professional Iron woman. And I met her on an airplane, and she was eating an avocado, and I looked at her and I thought, So we started a conversation, and she was going down to Mexico to run the Ironman or do the Ironman down there. Yeah. And we started talking about her ketone levels, and hers were lower than mine. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm than this Iron woman. And that was my thinking back then. But it's because her body's using the ketones. And they're burning them off, so they're lower, and she doesn't have much body fat to burn, so they're lower, but she's very efficient. Whereas I was taking in exogenous ketones, boosting up the ketone level in my blood, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my body was utilizing them as efficiently as hers. So,
if you're an athlete low, the longer that you've been keto, they'll be lower. It's not a bad thing to be low in ketones.
No. And that also brings up the fact that when you're doing the urine test strips, they are only going to show ketones in the very beginning because you're urinating out the actual ketones and not utilizing them efficiently. Well, I want to talk about what does your day look like? What do you eat? I know you work out like a fiend, and you're a very busy woman, busy mom. What does your day look like as far as, because people always say I don't have time to cook. And I mean, my goodness, if you have time to cook, then we all have time to cook.
You are so sweet. I guess that is just a priority. Feeding myself well gives me the energy to go hard and do a lot of things. If I sat down to a bowl of cereal, which would have just taken seconds to put together, I wouldn't have the energy or the desire or the passion to do what I do. It really is what you feed yourself. So it's kind of interesting. I do love eggs, but my eggs come in the evening. So I usually, my first meal after I've run, I love filet mignon, and so I get that from Butcher Box. I get filet mignon, so I have, sometimes I'll have like a filet mignon, and I usually make like this brown butter truffle sauce. Again, like I do a lot of sauces because the fat becomes my energy for running and stuff. When I was losing weight, I wouldn't have done these fatty sauces, but I make this really great, and like truffle, are they really carnivore? No. So see, I'm cheating already. And then in Hawaii, I was eating fish every day. So I've been really like craving fish. So I usually do a couple pieces of fish, whether it be halibut or I get stuff from Sizzlefish mailed. I don't like going to the store. I usually get most of my proteins mailed to me, which is nice because I it's safer now. But yeah, I'll do a couple pieces of white fish, and I usually make this like a ginger sauce with it, which is really good. And sometimes I'll have some iceberg lettuce with it, but iceberg lettuce, there's no, oxalates in there. It's pretty much a watery vegetable, but it's usually like meat and fish. That's what I really like for my first meal. And then usually later on in the evening, I make this really great keto bread. I call it, it's keto bread or carnivore bread. It's carnivore friendly. And I'll have toast pieces of that, fried or toasted, and a lot of eggs with ham. And I make this really delicious sauce to go with it to put over. It's kind of like a hollandaise sauce, and you can make that dairy free. And I really love that. I love those two meals, and I thrive on two meals. I have one meal around right about now is my first meal, and then my second meal is about 5:30.
And that's something that it's just when people say, oh gosh, I can't do that, that's so restrictive. It is so easier. Freeing. It's so freeing because you are only cooking or preparing 2 meals a day instead of needing to plan out 6 small meals a day. I always bring up my dad as an example because
that's okay.
Yeah,
he still loves you.
I know. Well, and we'll see if he listens. But he is a sugar burner, and he wakes up, and as soon as he wakes up, he has his coffee and his cereal. And then, of course, what is he doing 2-3 hours later? He's hungry. And if he's eating every 3 meals, and you talk about restrictive, that is tying you to a schedule of food. Whereas gosh, if I'm going out and I'm having to carpool my kids somewhere or do something and it runs an hour or two late, I'm fine. I have no need to get somewhere or make sure I have a power bar or something in my car.
Right.
I don't need that because as soon as I run out of my fuel that I've eaten, I start burning my fat on my body and my brain feels great.
And you can live your life. Like I go out paddleboarding with the whales. If you haven't seen it, check out that YouTube video. I had a baby whale almost tick me off of my paddleboard. It was so amazing. Some huge mom and baby whale right next to me. But I can go out there for hours and not worry about when's my next meal, which I used to eat all the time. And intermittent fasting wasn't easy for me. But with time, I realized my body's not hungry. It was just, I was so used to having bed night snacks and like, it was just a habit that I had to change. And my kids are 9 and 10. And guess what? They eat 3 meals. They're not snacking. We can go to the zoo and I don't need to bring Cheerios and all that stuff. Because they're not hungry. If they want a snack, I would never limit them. But like, I'll say, are you hungry for lunch? And it's like 1 o'clock and they're like, no, not yet. Thanks anyway. And it's like, no, we have to have lunch because, I want to go do something. But it's just funny how they're, even as children, 9 and 10, and fasting is a natural thing. If you think about all of the great people in history, they've all fasted. Intermittent fasting is where you let your body heal. I saw that question come in.
Yeah.
It lets your body, if you're always digesting food, you can't ever heal your cells. It's always focused on digesting food. Intermittent fasting is just closing that window. So it's kind of you eat within a 6-hour window. So maybe it can be, you can eat 3 times within that window, 2 times within that window, whatever you need. But if you eat, at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. and then you close the window, you don't eat outside that window. And that means, alcohol, food, anything like that. What's interesting is Buddha, we think of Buddha as this like chubby man. He actually was very lean and svelte, and he wanted to find enlightenment, and he was very rich, and he gave away all of his money, and he became very poor, and he would fast for days. And that's not where he found enlightenment. He found enlightenment when he found moderation, and he found intermittent fasting, where he had a very defined window. I think it was 6 or 7 hours. And that's where he found enlightenment. And that's when I work the best, was when I wake up and I write in a fasted state. And that's what all of our greats did. Whatever religion you are, Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Benjamin Franklin, everybody fasted.
Well, it's in every religious book and every religion as well. We are running out of time, Maria, which I'm so bummed about because we're so much more we could talk about. But before we go, I want to make sure you tell people where they can find you. And we've mentioned it a couple times, but also about your cookbooks and your website and what you offer.
Well, thanks so much. Check out YouTube. Nobody wants to read anymore. That's fine. There's a lot of really great videos out there on my new YouTube channel. It's really been fun making it. I'll make any recipe. You guys should, shoot me a comment on my articles, and I'll make any video. But I'm also have a free website with lots of free information at mariamindbodyhealth.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, but if you find mariamindbodyhealth.com, you will find me elsewhere.
And I highly recommend watching her cook on YouTube because it makes it so much more approachable.
I leave the things I mess up in there and how I would fix them. Like I forgot to put salt in there. I was like, oops, let's do this now.
Well, and I love the boys and how they're getting involved, and it shows you what you can be doing with your kids, which I think a lot of people are afraid to do. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully maybe we can have you back in the future because I know people are going to want to hear more from you. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us today with all your great questions. If they were not answered, feel free to email me directly, Sarah Banta at sarah@acceleratedhealthproducts.com, or I can pass them along to Maria as as well. Happy to put together a health protocol for you. If this sounds overwhelming to you, I can help you start, and so can Maria. I know sometimes it's hard to know where to start. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, and my YouTube channel under Accelerated Health Radio, in addition to iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora, or whatever podcast platform you subscribe to. I'm also now doing Accelerated Health Bites, where I do short informational videos about health topics and solutions that you ask me about. So if you have a health condition or a topic you want me to address, please let me know. And if you like what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button and share with a few friends who may need my help. As you share my channel, it helps me help more people like you and bring more cutting edge guests like Maria on my show. Don't miss next week's interview with Ken Rolla from Fresh and Alive. We will be discussing radiation, the Internet of Things, and how to protect yourself. Send me the questions, and you can also use coupon W4HC20 for 20% off site-wide, including the supplements, all on my website that we may have talked about today. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great week.
Are you wanting to optimize your physical, mental, and emotional health? Visit www.acceleratedhealthproducts.com. Accelerated Health Products to detox, reset, and rebuild your immune system naturally, and to accelerate your body, mind, and spirit with cutting-edge supplements and solutions. Get Sarah Banta's personal advice on a protocol just right for you. That's www.acceleratedhealthproducts.com. Thank you for joining us today on W4HC Radio for Accelerated Health Radio with Sarah Banta. Make sure to tune in every week at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to uncover your highest potential through natural and innovative wellness modalities.